now we're going to talk about nuclear fission, which is different from nuclear fusion. Um, I'm sorry, nuclear fusion. That's what we'll be talking about now, which is different from nuclear fission that we talked about earlier. So, just to remind you, nuclear fission involves basically breaking up a large nucleus or a larger nucleus into smaller fragments. And the examples that we looked at involve energy production. But you can also have energy production as a result of what is called nuclear fusion, where you're combining light nuclei to make a heavier one. So this one is very important, this particular process, because, and our very lives depend on it when you come to think of it, because this is responsible for the energy emanating from the sun. And of course, we all know that life on Earth, all lives, plant and animal, depend on energy provided by the sun. So these are the type of nuclear fusion reaction that takes place in the sun. You can have two deuterium nuclei coming together to form a tritium and a protium. And the energy in that case released is 6.3 times 10 to the minus 13. And we have some other examples here. And these are all examples of the type of reactions that takes place in the sun. And as you can see, the amount of energy required is relatively large, right? Thankfully, as I said before, our lives depend on these reactions, all right? Now, what scientists have tried to do is basically recreate on Earth what is taking place in the sun in terms of these reactions. So basically what they try to do is to bring smaller nuclei together, right, in order to make them react, and then we can use the energy, just as how we use electrical energy and so on. Problem with that is that the nuclei that you're trying to bring together are very, well, they're positively charged, and therefore a large amount of energy is needed to bring those nuclei together, to force them together to produce more energy when they collide, all right? So the energy cost at the front end is very large. If you can overcome that, then the gain will be very rewarding at the back end, because the amount of energy produced will be larger compared to the amount of energy that was used to bring the nuclei together. So physicists have been working hard at trying to develop, techniques and apparatus to basically achieve this goal, right? And there's one particular instrument known as the tokamak. Basically, this is the diagram which represented. And basically what this does is that it maintains the temperature of the nuclei so that they exist as ionized gases, right? And what they do also is concentrate those particles so that they can react in order to form, products, and therefore more energy being produced. The problem with that, of course, is the amount of energy required, because a large amount of energy is basically required in order to keep the gases in an ionized state, especially since they exist as ions, right? And just in case you don't know, ions in the gaseous state, that is known as plasma, all right? So basically, more work is being done on this, and it has costed a lot from what I've read before. So as far as I know, they have not achieved much or anything at all in terms of the goal, which is, of course, to make this a valuable energy source. However, I will say this, and I need to get out of this here and refer to an article which talks about a recent discovery. And when I say recent, this was done, or this was announced in December of 2022, where some scientists were looking at an alternative method of achieving the same thing. In other words, bringing nuclei together to react so that they can produce energy, right? So there is a facility known as the National Ignition Facility, which is part of the Lawrence Livermore Labs in California. If you don't know about that particular lab, they're it's a federally funded lab, and they're heavily involved in these types of nuclear reactions and discoveries and so on. And the researchers in this group, they basically were able to succeed in actually overcoming that energy cost that I mentioned before, right? It's a very complicated and complex setup that they have, but basically what they did, I'm trying to see if I can find the actual part which describes what happens. Basically, what they did was that they allow hydrogen ions, right, to fuse into helium and release the energy that requires temperatures of millions of degrees Celsius. That is very hard to achieve, as I said before. But they actually achieved this, and I'm looking for the section where they talk about how they actually did it. I think, if I remember correctly, they basically encase the nuclei in diamond, and let me see here. Okay, here it is. So basically, what they did, firstly, they said that the laser that they use, which is the energy source, is housed in a building the size of 3 U.S. football fields, and it delivers a powerful infrared pulse split into 192 beams that are converted into ultraviolet light, and then these beams are focused on the target, and it says the element in this case is gold, all right, that they use, and then when it's heated to millions of degrees, the gold emits X-rays that vaporize the diamond shell into a capsule, and the blasted diamond implodes the fuel, compressing it and heating it, and that results basically in energy being produced as a result. All right. So, again, the story is a bit more complicated than that, how I summarized it, but basically that's what was achieved, right? And everybody's excited about this in terms of, that particular achievement, because this can potentially lead to other discoveries. For example, if somebody with the know-how and the business acumen, they can actually convert this into something that can be used to power, devices, motor cars, and so on. So there's a lot of potential as far as this discovery is concerned. All right.